Hi, my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. This introduction video, or part of the video, is actually going to be different than the rest of the video. If you have watched my previous video where I talk about... Sorry guys, I just took a shower. I talk about the book that I was reading, Medicine and Religion. At the end of that video I said that, it ran a bit long, so I'm just going to cut that video in two. So this is the second part, which is not on medicine and religion. Originally that video was supposed to be just the nonfiction books that I've been reading. So this book is the second part of that. So I'm going to end this introduction here and let past me continue the video. I'm still in the process of finishing this book. The first part of this book, it's Eamon Duffy's Mark and Hours, English People and Their Prayers. I finished the first part of this book, the medieval section, during last quarter, and the last part of the book is set during the Tudor era. I think it might go a little bit into the Stuart era, but there's not as much in this section just because there are more Book of Hours that were being made, I believe during the first part of the book, during medieval era, simply because Mary was being de-emphasized, and a big portion of the Book of Hours was the Hours of the Blessed Virgin. So, with the de-emphasizing the role of the Blessed Virgin, once Catholicism got supplanted by the Protestant Reformation, then it would make sense that the Book of Hours would sort of start fading out of popularity because the Office of the Blessed Virgin just was not something that would have, I think they would have been uncertain and a little uncomfortable praying that, because they knew that anything that even had a whiff of popishness would have been frowned upon. And during a time period that, depending who was in power, either side could find that they would be burned for not standing in line with whoever was in charge. It was just safer, I think, for a lot of people to just keep their heads down and to not rock the boat. Unless you were someone like Thomas More, who was the first person whose Book of Hours we cover for this era. And this is really nice because you also have in here, apparently his Book of Hours, when it was found, there's a lot of his own annotations. So you see which verses really touched him, or that really were had some sort of meaning to him while he was in prison. And he also added to it, he has a prayer that, I'm trying to find it. He has a prayer that he wrote that he has attached to his book, or either attached or slid into his Book of Hours, that he wrote while he was in prison. So very touching stuff. I do recommend, actually I might need to mark that page, I didn't mark that one. I do recommend checking it out. His commentary is interesting. Now I think that Duffy misses the point a little bit at certain sections where he mentions that there's a vivid glimpse of the isolated soul longing for the sociability of the parish church. That should give us pause for the idea of More having found his cloister in the tower. But I think that perhaps Duffy I'm not quite sure where Duffy got that from, because he was taking that from a section where the note that Moore had written was, it's against the opening of Psalm 83. How lovely are thy tabernacles. The other translation is thy dwelling place, O Lord God of hosts. My soul longeth and fainteth for the courts of the Lord. Now, then Moore's note to that verse is the prayer of one shut up in prison or lying sick in bed, yearning to go to church, or any faithful soul who yearns for heaven. Now, Duffy had the odd take that this was a man then who was an isolated soul longing for sociability of the parish church. And I thought that was a bit of an odd take. I mean, he could have had that, but what I saw there was this was, he also mentions later on that the annotation recalls a prayer that Moore wrote after being condemned to death, and which, despite its focus on his own approaching death, had a strong communal emphasis, articulated in petitions for thy grace, to long for thy sacraments, and that God would make us all lively members of sweet Savior Christ and thine holy mystical body, thy Catholic Church. So, Duffy saying that in writing these things that Moore is very focused on the communal, and oddly not as much on the individual as you would think someone in his position would be, which I actually would flip that and say that, okay, there might have been some focus on the communal, but actually he was quite decently focused on the individual, because if you look at what he's actually saying, for example, take the first one. The prayer of one shut up in prison or lying in bed, yearning to go to church, or any faithful soul who yearns for heaven. Well, this is a hunger for the grace received from the sacraments, from the solace he received from the true presence. That his reference to the prayer of one shut up or in prison or lying sick in bed, yearning to go to church, or of any faithful soul who yearns for heaven, makes it clear where his mind is. He's not thinking of mere sociability, but of strength, of grace from the sacraments. So I thought that was a bit of an odd take that Duffy didn't pick up on that. The other thing that I thought was odd, that was just along the same line that I found it odd that Duffy didn't pick up on, is that I have the extra sticky note that I don't need there. I will take care of that 1 second. So the other section where I think it's a little bit, that Duffy kind of is a little bit off the mark, is where he talks about this prayer that Thomas More writes. And like I said, I highly recommend someone reads it. He was writing it while he was in prison. And it's 114 and 115 in the marking of the hours, but I'm sure that it can be found online. So he said that this prayer, which was almost certainly composed in the tower, picks up the many themes of other tower works and closely resembles a long prayer More composed after he had been condemned to death, not least in its concluding intercession for his enemies. But notice that despite its special appropriateness for More in his prison, it also is an utterly conventional tutored prayer, sections of which can have little immediate application to the tower. Even in this extremity, Moore's devotional instinct moves towards the human condition in general and to the universally applicable disciplines of the spiritual life. From the tower he could have hardly needed much assistance. Now this was, again, an odd take for me, because if you look at it from Moore's point of view, this isn't necessarily assistance that he's requesting for physical. He's asking for a spiritual assistance. Yeah, he could be asking for physical, but most likely he's asking for spiritual assistance. He could be asking for the strength to persevere against pressure to give in to Henry VIII. He could be also asking for grace not to fall into despair and to hold out against spiritual attack during a vulnerable time. Yeah, it might be universally applicable prayer, but most likely it was also very personal. And I thought it was funny that Duffy missed that. And usually Duffy, I find, hits a nail on the head when it comes to this material. But there's just a couple of those things I just thought it was interesting that he was so widely off the mark, it seemed, when it came what Moore could have possibly been thinking when he was writing these things. We actually have Moore's notes. We have Moore's personal writing. Moore's actually saying what he's thinking, versus when they were looking at the Book of Hours for the average person who had a Book of Hours, or Richard III's Book of Hours in medieval times, and they were scribing certain thoughts and feelings to these people while they were praying. They didn't have the context of these people's writings in there, and so they just chose that, okay, well then obviously they had these, certain motivations, because of course they would. That's just, let's look at this in the least, charitable way possible. That they obviously had these awful, motivations behind praying this. So that's one, we have Moore's words. Moore literally says in his commentary next to Psalm 83, where he has a note that he literally writes, the prayer of one shut up in prison, lying sick in bed, yearning to go to church, or any faithful soul who yearns for heaven. He's writing what this makes him think of, which kind of gives you a window into what he personally was thinking of. Just like when we're looking at his prayer, he's giving you an idea. He's giving you a personal look into what he is personally praying. And while there are some things that you could argue this falls in the normal realm of what Christian prayer looked like at the time, yes, but there are definitely things that you can look at and say, like, yes, this applies to him, and these are words that he wrote, so it isn't weird to think that he might have had these meanings, or at least these thoughts in the back of his head while he was writing this. This isn't a psalm that was pre-written that he's praying from. This is a prayer that he himself wrote. And so that's why it's a little bit odd to me that Duffy seemed to kind of miss that Moore was most likely having a very personal meaning behind the things that he actually wrote in this Book of Hours. So yeah, I just thought that was interesting. Like I said, usually Duffy is, right on the mark. I don't know quite what happened here, why he missed when it came to that. I just want to add a little tabby there so I can find this page again later if I want to. There we go. I don't know why I didn't put tab down there earlier. But yeah, so that is my commentary on that. Oh look, one of my annotation bags. So, book stuff. It has a bunch of tabbies and clear sticky notes, pens, highlighters, that kind of thing. And the final thing, this video is going to end up longer than I want, but hopefully once I edit it down, it'll be more manageable. Sorry, pain in the back of my head. Must be the weather. Hope I'm not going to get a migraine. Well, that's more like the pain I've had. I've had a C1, C2 fusion, and before I had that fusion, I used to get a lot of pressure up here, and every once in a while, it can still ache, and I guess that's just something that it's been ever since, even after the surgery, so every once in a while it still aches, and just putting a little bit of counter pressure sometimes can make it ease up. Anyway, so the Lindisfarne Gospel, I do have some notes in here. not a lot that I really want to cover. I did enjoy learning about the Aldred's gloss and colophon, learning about how gloss is basically a medieval version of annotation, and colophon would add in details like this was the person who wrote it, this is where he wrote it, and other people involved in the creation of said work. And Michelle P. Brown, who has written this book on Lindisfarne Gospels, is talking about using this gloss and colophon of Aldred's to help not only date when the Lindisfarne Gospels were written, but to figure out by whom they were written, bound, had the metalwork done, who did all those things, but also where those things were done. And she makes an argument for Lindisfarne actually being the location that the Lindisfarne Gospels were created. And that sounds like it'd be a duh kind of thing, but a lot of times these Gospels, where these books when they're found, are not necessarily named after where they were made, but either where they were found, what collection they were found in, because there's I want to say that there's one that's called can't remember the name right now. It'll come to me later, but there's been at least a couple of different manuscripts that have been found that were named such because they were found in like a certain person's collection, or they were donated to a certain museum, so that would contribute to what the collection was named, or what the document was named, the book. So the fact that this was called Lindisfarne Gospels could or could not have indicated that that was where this is actually written. But Michelle makes a pretty good argument for the fact that it probably was, in fact, written at Lindisfarne. And there's just a lot in here that talks about the movements of the monks. I think annotating is really helpful here because if I'm tired, it's easy to lose where I'm at and why she's talking about this. Annotating has definitely made it a little bit easier to get more out of it because there's quite a bit here. And she lets you know that, hey, if you need more information, you might want to access other books because this is going to be a very packed book. This isn't necessarily for the newbie. So I have been doing a lot of referencing. I have a book that's got terms in regards to medieval manuscripts, and I have to reference that a decent amount because she warned you at the beginning of the introduction she wasn't going to slow down, and she doesn't. So there's a lot here. I wanted to be farther along than I am because this is one of my books for the Big Book Summer reading challenge, but now that I have finished Medicine and Religion for this quarter, and I'm going to take my time with this one for this quarter. Honestly, it shouldn't take me too long. Once I get along, I'm almost done with the first chapter for this quarter. I mean, there's really not that much left to read. If I sat down focused, I could be done with this book really quickly. But I have, the whole quarter to finish this little bit of the book. But yeah, although this isn't a book for this quarter, this is one that was a holdover from last quarter, but I am now reading as a part of Big Book Summer because I started like right beforehand, and I was told that it would count. So I have information both for Big Book Summer Challenge and for the Historathon down in the description box. And yeah, I think that's all for this video. I do have a decent amount of editing to do for it, so I'm not sure when exactly this will go up. But yeah, I hope that you get something out of this video, and thank you very much for watching. I will see you again next time. God bless. Bye.